Everyone thinks they understand Canada's east coast, and that's exactly why they're wrong. They see aging towns, higher unemployment, lower incomes, and assume the story ends there. They see outmigration and federal transfer payments, and conclude decline. But what if those numbers are hiding the most important geoeconomic transformation in North America? What if the region everyone dismisses is quietly sitting on the ingredients for the next strategic pivot of the Western Hemisphere? Because beneath the surface metrics of population and wages lies something far more powerful. Geography, energy, minerals, food systems, trade corridors, and military positioning converging in one place. Start with the narrative everyone repeats. The Atlantic provinces, Newfoundland and Labrador, Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick together hold only about 2.4 million people, less than Toronto alone. Young workers have historically left for Alberta's oil fields or Ontario's manufacturing base. Average household incomes lag behind central and western Canada. Newfoundland and Labrador's unemployment rate has hovered around 10 to 12%, well above the national average. From a surface-level macroeconomic perspective, it looks like periphery, but macroeconomics often mistakes scale for significance. And in geopolitics, scale is rarely the decisive variable, because economic gravity does not just follow population, it follows resources and choke points. And Canada's east coast sits at the intersection of both. Look first at food security. The Grand Banks off Newfoundland were once among the richest fishing grounds on Earth, supplying cod across Europe and North America for centuries. When the cod fishery collapsed in 1992 due to overfishing, tens of thousands of jobs disappeared almost overnight. That collapse shaped the global perception of the region as a victim of resource exhaustion. But ecosystems adapt and markets shift. Lobsters, snow crab, and shrimp surged in value. The Atlantic lobster fishery alone is now worth over $1 billion annually, and snow crab adds another billion. Nova Scotia became the world's largest exporter of lobster, while New Brunswick dominates North American snow crab markets. The lesson is not nostalgia for cod, it is resilience of marine capital. In a world where protein demand rises and fisheries elsewhere are strained, the Atlantic shelf remains a strategic biological asset. Shift from the ocean surface to beneath it, and the scale expands dramatically. In 1979, the Hibernia oil field was discovered roughly 315 kilometers offshore Newfoundland. Estimated reserves exceeded 1 billion barrels. The engineering challenge was extreme. Icebergs, massive waves, brutal storms. It took 18 years and $6 billion to build the platform, a 1.2 million ton structure engineered to withstand iceberg impacts. Production began in 1997 and transformed Newfoundland and Labrador's fiscal landscape. Today, offshore fields including Hibernia, Terra Nova, White Rose, and Hebron collectively produce roughly 200,000 barrels per day, generating billions in annual value. But here is the critical escalation. This production is not the ceiling. The Flemish Pass Basin east of Newfoundland contains approximately 1.2 billion barrels already discovered, with broader offshore basins estimated to hold over 60 billion barrels of oil equivalent in potential resources. For context, Alberta's oil sands reserves are roughly 170 billion barrels. That comparison places Newfoundland's offshore in the same strategic conversation. Not equal, but relevant. In energy geopolitics, relevance shifts bargaining power, and oil is only one axis. The Scotian shelf off Nova Scotia historically supported the Sable offshore energy project, producing natural gas for 2 decades before depletion in 2018. Geological assessments continue to identify untapped potential in surrounding basins. Meanwhile, New Brunswick's Bay of Fundy hosts the highest tides in the world, up to 16 meters, creating enormous theoretical tidal energy capacity. Hydroelectric power from Churchill Falls in Labrador provides over 5,400 megawatts of capacity. Add emerging offshore wind zones and hydrogen proposals, and the region transitions from fossil-heavy legacy to diversified energy frontier. In an era defined by energy security and decarbonization simultaneously, that dual capacity matters. Now connect that energy story to minerals. The Labrador Trough contains some of the largest iron ore deposits globally, with annual production between 17 and 23 million tons. This iron feeds steel mills in North America, Europe, and Asia. Voisey's Bay in northern Labrador holds one of the richest nickel deposits ever discovered, containing nickel, copper, and cobalt essential for electric vehicle batteries. Rare earth elements at Strange Lake, particularly heavy rare earths like dysprosium and terbium, represent potential alternatives to China's dominance in global supply chains. These elements are critical for wind turbines, electronics, and defense systems. Pause and observe the pattern. offshore oil for energy security, nickel and cobalt for batteries, rare earths for clean tech and military systems, iron ore for industrial manufacturing, fisheries for food resilience, potash in New Brunswick for fertilizer and global agriculture, gypsum and salt in Nova Scotia for construction and infrastructure, Prince Edward Island producing 25% of Canada's potatoes while generating roughly a quarter of its electricity from wind. This is not a narrow resource base, it is a diversified portfolio aligned with 21st century demand. Yet resources alone do not create power. Location multiplies resources. And this is where the East Coast's underestimated leverage becomes visible. Look at a globe rather than a flat map. Newfoundland is the closest point in North America to Europe. During World War II, St. John's served as a crucial Allied convoy assembly point in the Battle of the Atlantic. That was not accidental. It was geometric inevitability. The shortest transatlantic air and sea routes arc northward. Undersea fiber optic cables connecting North America and Europe run along this corridor. Geography did not change when the war ended. It simply waited for the next strategic cycle. That next cycle may be Arctic. As Arctic ice recedes, the Northwest Passage becomes increasingly navigable for seasonal shipping. Any vessel transiting between Asia and Europe via Canadian Arctic waters must pass near the Atlantic Gateway. That positions St. John's as a potential refueling and resupply node. Halifax already offers one of the largest natural harbors in the world, ice-free year-round. St. John, New Brunswick, operates as a deep-water year-round port, linking Atlantic Canada with the northeastern United States. Infrastructure such as the Confederation Bridge connecting Prince Edward Island to the mainland reinforces integration. Ports are not just commercial facilities, they are leverage points in global trade networks. Layer onto that the military dimension. The North Atlantic is regaining strategic prominence. Russian submarine activity, Chinese maritime expansion, and renewed NATO vigilance reposition. The Atlantic is a contested security corridor. CFB Halifax houses Canada's Atlantic Fleet and represents the country's largest military base by personnel. Surveillance, anti-submarine warfare, and maritime domain awareness operations converge here. Energy infrastructure, undersea cables, and Arctic approaches intersect within operational reach of this coastline. When trade routes, energy assets, and military positioning overlap geographically, that geography becomes strategic. So why is this region still perceived as economically marginal? Infrastructure constraints. Labrador's mineral wealth is remote, with limited rail and road capacity. Offshore oil faces high production costs due to harsh ocean conditions. The population base is small, reducing local fiscal capacity for large-scale capital projects. Extraction without efficient transport limits realized value. In economic terms, the binding constraint has not been resource scarcity, it has been logistics. But constraints evolve. Federal infrastructure programs totaling over $180 billion across 12 years are channeling funds into trade corridors and port modernization. Halifax is receiving terminal and rail upgrades. Private mining and energy firms are investing in access roads and development studies. The infrastructure gap is not closed, but it is narrowing. When logistics improve, stranded assets become active assets. Now connect all of this in sequence. Global energy volatility increases demand for diversified oil and gas sources. Decarbonization policies increase demand for nickel, cobalt, and rare earth elements. Food insecurity heightens fertilizer and fisheries value. Arctic warming alters shipping patterns. NATO recalibrates its Atlantic posture. Each of these macro trends independently raises the strategic value of Canada's East Coast.